Good evening. Welcome to the Big Down this Friday evening. It's Friday night. It's your boy Bobby Hill. How y'all doing? Hope everything's going good with y'all. Hope you had a good week this week. Hope you wrapped it up strong. Hope able to maybe able to enjoy this weekend. All the fathers out there, I give them a happy Father's Day. Excuse me, happy early Father's Day. Salute me and being a father myself. I like to say salute to everybody. All the fathers out there. It's a hard job out there to try to make it seem like it's something that it's not. It's hard. It's hard. It's tough. We got all these stigmas out here, about being a father. Depends on how you look. Depends on what your stigma is. You know, Before going any further, I have to give a shout out to my lovely wife, Sandra Hill. She's working right now. And she get off in a little bit. Told I missed her. Told her extraño mucho. She be home in a little bit, so yeah, give her a shout out. Like I said, I always say she's the reason why I'm doing this. She's my backbone. Yeah, I give a shout out to all the the fathers out there doing holding it down. Despite all the criticism and all the pressures, still holding it down, being that rock, being that safety, being that comfort, that safe, knowing that everything is going to be okay. It's that protection, that comfort we can provide that that can't be replicated. Something powerful about father being there, father coming around. Kids sort of straighten up a little bit when they come. Yeah, but yeah, for me, it's you know, I don't know, sort of bittersweet for me because tonight actually I want to talk about it's just my journey a little bit. Being a being especially being a Father's Day and stuff. I don't mind getting personal a little bit, talking about. I don't want say names because I'm not here trying to settle scores. I'm not here trying to make somebody look bad or get back at nobody because I'm not like that. That's childish. I don't do stuff like that. I'm not out here trying to do that. I'm just I'm just talking about, things I experienced and things, a little bit of pain I experienced. And maybe through my pain, might can, if it, like I said, if it helps somebody or, I might need help. Somebody can help me, So that's how I do it. I ain't trying to. It's ain't about settling the scores or anything like that. So I won't use nobody names or you know. The people, some people who listen to this might know the names involved, but I'm not gonna call out nobody names because I'm not here for that. But yeah, you know, I was, first was married in uh, 19, no, I'm talking 19, 2000. Yeah, 2000. I think Elijah was born, I'm sorry, this is my son name. Elijah was born in 2000, December, 2001. His brother, we got married, we young, no one that young, we was in our 20s and stuff. So we got married, and we had, one child. Then, we had we were young, we were young and, we were together in high school. We separated for a long time, whatever, got back together, thinking things were going to be as if they were in high school, quickly realizing that they weren't, but, still tried to, make things work. Had another child, two other child, a boy and two girls, you know, and, you know, made no mistake about it. And I love being a father. I love that. I love like creating, the fact that you creating another human being. I cherish that. And I cherish the fact that I was watching them grow, helping them, participating, help. I was coaching soccer. Elijah first started playing soccer at 3 years old, and I didn't coach his first year. I coached when he was 4 years old. I coached him then. Um, you know, watching one, actively going to the games, taking them to daycare every day, picking them up, doing everything, helping them out with homework, whatever work they have from daycare, just, spending all the time watching movies. That was the only time in my adult life I played video games. I was playing with Elijah because he had gotten, what was I right then? The GameCube. And that, when Elijah was born, this is why Spider Man is his favorite superhero, because when he was born, it was around the time Spider Man came out. Tobey Maguire. And I watched it. I liked it, and I bought it, and I watched it at home, and I love I love superhero movies. So I watched it, and he went head first into it. Bought him had bought him the Spider Man outfit, Spider Man shoes, shirt, like all the kids. I had all the bought him the little glove that had the little silly string that shoot out the stuff like the web. He used to go around going psst, psst, psst. They used to do the kids thinking they're Spider Man. Yeah, I was always involved in my children's life every day, and I cherished that. I used to always say it was the best job in the world. You know, the benefits you get from that job can't be monetized. The benefits you get from that job is in here, in your heart, in your soul. So yeah, I really cherish that. And I said I had my second, had a daughter, and things were still up and down. They were rocky and stuff, but still, still were there for the children. But things started getting tough. With in our marriage and stuff, things was going in different directions. We had different ideas on how our relationship should go. We had different ideas on how life should go. It just happened, man. People fall, drift apart and stuff like that. And but just unfortunate that we had children. It wasn't unfortunate that we had children. Let me get that, let me straighten that, clean that up. It's not unfortunate we had children, but it's unfortunate that children were involved right here. That that the children were just, like I said, it's cliche. I understand. I'm probably one of million, thousands, hundreds of thousands of stories of men going through things with their children's mother, and things not going the way they wanted. Not because of they didn't love the children, not because they didn't want to be in their children's lives. No, it's because that the system that we have in this country always favors the mother, always. And we always, whenever even if we have a legitimate claim, a legitimate argument, a legitimate whatever, we still are fighting behind the eight ball. We still have to convince them that we are, because they're going to automatically assume that they assume that the mother, the children need to be with the mother. So, like I said, as we got, as we got, it kept on going. We had we tried to, we still try to hang in there, reconcile again, and we end up having another child. So then after that, things sort of still went bad. Things went rocky, but I was still being a father. I was head first. I was serious about that. No matter how bad our relationship was, I was still being a father. Like I said, taking my kids to school every day, discipline, making them make sure that they're, you know, being good students, not causing any problems, make sure that they're trying hard, you know, not out here, being mischievous, being helpful and stuff like that. So try to instill some values in them at a young age, whenever I could. But, as, with their mother, as the relationship kept deteriorating, sort of made it not not impossible, but it made it difficult because she was putting the kids in the middle of it. And I was telling her that, my feelings for my kids are different. Then don't put our kids in the middle of our problem because they're not the problem. But that's just the way things went. So we ended up, breaking up, and you know, and I still, still remain in touch with my children. We still lived in the same town, so I was able to go get my children and stuff. And she hated that because she wanted to be able to keep me working with kids because she wanted to use that as a weapon. Like, how dare you leave me? How dare you break up this family? I wasn't breaking it up because like a mutual separation or whatever, but to make things look better, say you left the family. So, you know, she hated the fact that I could still go out to the soccer game, which I was doing, and still, go pick up the kids and spend the weekend with them and all that. Still trying to do all that because she knew I loved that. She knew that I expressed to her how I felt about doing that. So she knew that. So, she couldn't, at the time, she couldn't do nothing about it. So I was just blinded by the fact I was happy that I was, was spending time with my children and stuff. But I was blinded by that because I couldn't, I was so focused on that. I wasn't paying attention to her that she was, planning on leaving, planning on moving, leaving and stuff. So me not, focusing on this, you know, after like it was like 2 weeks. It went a couple weeks, and I wanted to go see my son on his birthday. So when I went to his school to go pick him up. The teacher told me that he had been gone. No, 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 no. It wasn't his birthday. It was after his birthday. I seen him when his birthday was last time I seen him. It was right after Christmas. His birthday was on December the 1st, so this was after Christmas. So I went, and, I went to go see him. I went to go see him, and the teacher, the administrator, when I told him the name, they was scrambling around. I was like, he was a student here, so they, came back to me and told me that yeah, they, he got his mom, took him out of the school like a few weeks ago. So at first, no, actually, that was the second. The first time I went to the daycare where my two daughters went. So they had told me they had been, they took them out. That they had been there. She took them out, and about a few weeks ago, so I was like, "Come on, that ain't true." So then, what's going on here? So I went, and it was a few miles. Went down to the elementary school where my son was going at. So I went there, and they told me that they took him out of the school about a few weeks ago. So he ain't been in school. So I was unaware. I was like I said, not knowing anything because nobody told me anything. I ain't know. I'm thinking my children were going to school. Everything's fine. I'm about to go spend time. I'm about to go, go hang out with them. About to go get them for the weekend, whatever. So still in shock. And I went down to where they used to stay at. And I went down to the house and I seen a for rent sign at the house. So, I was like, I was puzzled. But there's part of me knew what had happened because I had a few weeks like earlier. I had asked Elijah just out of the blue. I had asked him like, "Look, is your mom thinking about moving?" And he was like, "Yes, she's." He had said yes. He didn't say where. He didn't say anything else. He had said yes. So you know, I talked to the neighbor over there. And he told me. He said yes. You know, she had left. She and her mom packed up, and they left like like overnight, like thieves in the night, like just looked up and they were gone and stuff. So ever since, like I said, ever since then, I felt that was the end of me being a father to my children, to my three children. So God, I don't want to get about my personal relationship. I ain't know about it, but end up. Long story short, life goes on, marriage, whatever. End up having being in another relationship, and I end up having, Victoria. So that Victoria was, I felt like Victoria was. She was sent. It sounds crazy. I don't know. I think she was sent to me. I'm not overly religious. I do believe in a higher power, and I believe that higher power sent Victoria in my life to keep me from going crazy for losing my three kids, or my three kids being taken away from me, and all communication being cut off. But that's exactly what happened. They got taken away from me. I didn't get for all the sacrifice and all the you know work I put in being a good father to them children. I felt like I wasn't trying to tell she wanted to do what's best for whatever she felt was best. She has that right. She their mother. I never questioned that. I felt like I deserved to be put in the loop and like being told that 'cause they were my children just as much as they were hers. To be told that, hey, I'm about to leave, I'm about to go, or stuff like that. I didn't have no say so, and it was just taken away from me. And that's it's crazy because well, I said the system favors a woman because if I'd have did something like that, I would have had an amber alert put out on me and I'd have been properly arrested. So that's the time. That's the situation we live in. That's sucks, but yeah, that's what it is. But I had Victoria. I felt like she put me there. I mean, Victoria was put there to keep me distracted and not where. Still, don't forget them. Don't forget my children, but still, but let me instead of focusing on me losing them kids where they are, I can focus on being a father to Victoria. That's what I did. Focused all my energy on Victoria. And that was saying that was it was beautiful. It was beautiful, and like I said, don't get me wrong, relationship tough, relationship. Oh my God, that was, relationship tough, relationship with her, with her mama too. But I ended up. That's where I ended up. Driving. I ended up driving trucks and stuff. So I ended up, being away from home. So that sort of like turned me into a part-time father as far as being there physically. I always talked to her. I always talked to her on the phone, here around the school, working everything, even when I was driving trucks on the road. But me being there physically sort of took me away from there. So, you know, but that was because that was, at the time, that's what I needed to make a living. So that for me to go make money, had to sacrifice, time with my daughter, but still being there, talking to her, still being there, providing for her and stuff. So in a way, I was still able to, still be a father to her, still be able to be there, not the way I wanted to, but still able to be there. And eventually with social media, I never, I had an idea where my children were, but I never like because she never took out child support because I think she never wanted me to know where she was at. And I always had an idea that she was, where she was at, but at the time I was with, folks on Victoria, and I didn't have the resources to go go travel that far to do that just to be not to be told that hey whatever Mike can't see my kid or you got one day whatever visit or supervise visit whatever man. I just you know but eventually after with social media my children you know we ended up getting back in touch with each other and we it was hard. It was. I mean, I don't even. It was hard. It was hard being with my children. It was hard being. It was hard. I don't want to elaborate too much, but it was just hard. I cried a lot over my children. It affected me, and sometimes I would find myself getting upset for no reason. Not because I was mad at the person or mad at whatever. I was mad because of what had happened, and whatever. So it was a struggle for me. So I was able to get through that. Like I said, I was able to be there for Victoria. It was very we had a song by Outkast, Miss Jackson. I think it was I forgot it might have been Big Boy verse saying something about being there on the first day of school and graduation. And I that lyric that verse like really stuck on to me and I thinking about that. And I was really happy I was there for Victoria when she first started school and the day she graduated. I was being able to be there for her. And I was worried I wasn't gonna be able to be there for her graduation, but luckily things worked out. I was able to be there for her, be there and watch her graduate. So, as a father, that was very heartwarming for me to do that. Especially, I was afraid I wasn't going to be able to do it. So, that was a beautiful thing. But like I said, I got back in touch with my other children, and I could tell. Don't get me wrong, I love it, and I'm a grandfather and everything. So it's. Don't get me wrong. And I think it was the greatest when I got back in touch and oh my god, I felt like it was beautiful. But I also know that, you know, things are different as far as, they talk to me, but it's I could tell that years and years and years of, you know, them probably hearing how their father ain't worth a damn. I know it probably affect how they view me or how they, interact with me and stuff like. And I tell by the way they interact with me. Because at the very beginning, when we got in touch with them, and I was on the road a lot. I was driving a lot of miles, and initially, maybe I guess anybody would in that situation. The first thing I try to do, I try to overcompensate as far as just trying to throw money at them, throw money at them, throw money at them. Buy this, what they need, buy this, buy that. And I think by doing that, you know they thought that they could use that. But hey, look, okay, I see my dad can, he sort of like he buying the stuff. So only time I would hear from him when I need something. Dad, my car broke down. I need something. I need this. You got this. I need this. Can you send me this? Can you send that? Because one time I was sending all three of them money when I got paid. Just give it to him. I was just sending it to him. Just I don't know. You could say it was guilt, whatever. I don't know. I don't think it was. It was just me trying to be there for, like I said, I miss being a father to my children. I just wanted to be there for them. As that was my only way to be there. That's what I wanted to do. So, I did that for a while, but then I didn't see anything like, I wasn't getting anything out of it. Like, it was still the same thing. Like, even actually, I met my grandson, spent time with them, but I didn't feel like I feel like it was a one way effort. Like, I was putting forth all the effort to make this happen, and I wasn't getting help from the other side. So I can't. I'm like, my kids aren't. They're not young kids no more. I mean, they're not babies no more. They're adults. So if they feel, I feel like if they feel strongly about me as a father, as I feel about them as my children, I would feel like they would have some sort of effort from their part to. It wouldn't be just me trying to, make, go all the way, go 100%, go 100%, man. Instead of me going 50 and them meet me halfway with 50, something. But what can you do? I mean, you can't control other people. You can't make other people. You can't make other people feel a certain way. You can only control how you feel. So am I hurt? Yeah, I mean, I'm hurt. Yes, I'd be hurt. I'm hurt, but not, but I understand. I'm hurt, yes, for the whole situation. Like, not at my children. Like, I don't like this. No, because I understand. They probably lived their whole life with, understand the family that they grew up around. And they're probably hearing every day you saying that, you know, your daddy ain't shit. Your daddy broke up this family and all this stuff. So they grew up believing that their entire life. So even when they see me, even if I tell them, hey, that's not true, it don't matter. The damage has been done. They have already been convinced. The seed has already been sown in there. And hearing this, I don't think there's anything I can do that could ever take that away. I could start from now and go forward, but they still going. I still feel like it won't be like the unconditional love it was before. So that's what happened. I mean, that's what happened in life. I'm just one story of the hundreds of thousands of millions throughout this country, throughout this world of men being fathers, and having children and dealing with that aspect. You know, I'm just one of many stories. So it happens. And what we gotta do, just keep on. We gotta suck it up, man. You can't let that stuff just, you know, you can't let this stuff just take you down and wear you out, man. Don't let society, don't fall into the trap of letting people tell you who you are. Don't let people sit up there and say, well, where you at? You're not with your kids, or you a deadbeat dad or whatever, man. Tell that person to shut the hell up. They don't know what the hell going on. Tell them to mind their business. Because people like that, people always like to assume stuff. So don't, like I said, if you haven't been in that situation, don't let that stuff just, don't let it like destroy you. Will it get you down? Yes. And it's okay to be down for a little bit. It's okay. It's okay. You got to soak for a second. Sometimes that balances it out. That releases that pressure, that damn anger, or that anxiety and stuff. Sometimes you have to, break you down. Have to let it out, man. Cry, whatever, do whatever, let it out. Then you just get yourself back together and move on. Like I said, my cousin Ron Blackman always say, keep it moving. So I said, luckily I was built, strong. Don't let this stuff, you know, destroy you. But have I, like I said, have I suffered? Have I, suffered? Have I had to, release pressure, stress? Yeah, absolutely. You know, so and I still struggle with it every day. My kids, my kids, I don't hear from them. I don't hear from them like that. So like I said, I've reached out a lot, a whole lot, and I just like to sit back and just, you know, like I said, people say, people can say I'm wrong or whatever for what I don't think so, but I don't care. But I want to see, want to see your daddy. Call your daddy and say, "Hey, daddy, how you doing?" That's all. Them words go a long way. Hey, daddy, how you doing? 5 words. Hey, daddy, how you doing? So, like I said, sometimes just it's hard just to get the simple things in life. Sometimes it's just some, it may get hard to get the simple things, but simple things in life are the most. Sometimes the simple things in life are the most gratifying. Because sometimes the simple things prove that things are done with a pure intention, not because of money, not because of anything like that, because the person genuinely cares or genuinely wants to do or participate or whatever. So it's all about the simple things. It's simple saying, picking up the phone saying, "Hey Dad, how you doing? Just thinking about you. How you doing? You okay? Your health okay? Your heart okay? Cholesterol okay?" It can only help. We'll see. Like I said, I'm still, I'm still hopeful that one day that things are different. Always hopeful because I'm always an optimistic person. I always try to be an optimistic, glass half full person. Even though life seems like it's half empty right now, but I still try to be a glass half full person. So I still, hope, and I still, wish for hope. Hope for the day that they come say, "Dad, I want to come see y'all. We want to come down to, want to come to Texas, come see all this stuff." Because my life dream before I pass on this earth, what I would like to see is all my children in one area with me, in the same under the same roof with me. I've never had that. I had three of them. That's it. I haven't had all four. I have three of them and my grandson. That's it. I haven't had all my children and my grandson in the same, you know, in the same place with me at the same time. And that's what I, you know, hope for. That's the best word. That's what I hope for. Mhm. I did something. I did a first today. I like cooking. I got it from my mom. Shout out to my mom, Linda Kirby. I love you. I love you, mommy. One thing I got from her is, I learned how to watch her cook. I learned how to cook. I learned how to, because cooking, people think cooking is hard. To me, this is to me. I can't speak on everybody else because they cook differently. To me, cooking ain't hard. Cooking is, first of all, you got to you can't rush it. You can't rush cooking because when you rush, you make mistakes. Don't sit up here. You try to cook stuff too fast and skip steps and stuff. You learn how to follow directions and take your time. That's the key to them. To me, that's the key to cooking. Follow directions, take your time. So I I like cooking stuff. I'm trying to like cooking stuff from scratch. You know, because certain things I haven't tried. I'm gonna, I tried to cook a cake from scratch. I haven't tried to cook a cake. Excuse me. Sorry. I want to cook a cake from scratch. This one next thing, and the day what I cooked, I ain't never made it before was some bread. I made a loaf of bread from scratch. Never done that before, so I'm very proud of myself. First time I tried it, no, I did. This is the first time I did it. I did something wrong, you know, and I told my wife. I was like, "Look," she like, I had to go get some different flour. So she like, "If it mess up this time, don't even bother no more." I said, "Dad, way to be helpful, way to be optimistic." Like that, thanks for the confidence booster. Like, you don't think I'm gonna do it this time? She's like, "Nah, I'm just saying." But nah, I'm just playing with it. But what I had to, what the problem was before I go, the problem was that whenever I first made it, you know, you two of the ingredients you put are yeast and salt. So when you put the yeast and salt in, the flour, you're supposed to mix it all up while it's dry. Mix it all in. Make sure the yeast and the salt get all mixed in with the flour before you mix in the water. So what I did was I put the yeast and the salt in, and I did mix it up, and I put the water in. And then you know, whenever I, do all the steps where you try to, you have the dough, it wasn't solid enough. It wasn't, so it was sort of, yeah, too runny. So the bread didn't turn out good. So told I went and got some different. When I first I used all-purpose flour, which you can use. So I noticed when I got the flour, I noticed they got all types of flour now. They have bread flour, so I had to go back when and got some bread flour. I tried it again. I had seen some more videos, looked at, whatever, studied, did some more little intel, studied some more, and did it, made it again. Did it again. My dough was fine, nice and, sturdy. Made two little loaves. Actually, I posted on Facebook before went live. And I made two loaves of bread. Then put them in the oven, made them. Yes, and I ate me two pieces of them. I don't eat bread like that, but I actually like it. And actually, to put a little, it's just me, I brushed a little honey on top of it, throw a little sweetness on a little bit on it. So, it was pretty good. So, I'm trying to expand my horizons. I'm growing, I'm gardening, dealing with plants. I had one sunflower grow, but now the plant ain't died, but the flower's gone. This is gonna bloom later. But I have three other sunflowers now about ready to bloom. I have a rose bush that's about ready to bloom four roses. So I'm trying to do things to keep my mind busy. So and it's I love it. I love it. I love it. I love seeing, like I said, cooking. I love seeing. Thing is, I like about cooking is seeing the people's reaction after they had something that I cooked. That's what warms my heart with that. When I see people say, man, that was really good," or they eat all the food up, I'm mission accomplished. I say, all that was worth it if they do all that. So that's my philosophy with that. And with that being said, I think I took up enough of y'all time for tonight. I like to appreciate y'all. I appreciate y'all being here with me tonight. I like to thank y'all for being here. I hope y'all have a good weekend. I hope all your fathers have a happy Father's Day. Have a safe Father's Day. Make it back to your kids. Don't be out here wilding or whatever. You celebrate home with your kids. Celebrate with your kids. They're the reason why you're a father, because you got kids. So, don't be out here wilding. Make it back home. I would, be safe, be responsible. We are tripping out here. There's people out here ready to take advantage or hurt somebody. So out here tripping. So, keep your head on straight. Don't be out here tripping. As I always say, take care, kiss your kids, kiss your loved ones, tell them how you feel, give them a hug, do whatever, let them know what's going on, let them know before it's too late. You never know, it might be the last time. I love all of y'all. Y'all have a good evening. Y'all have a great weekend. I'll talk to y'all later.